In the year 1754, a ship arrived at the mouth of the Tees River, carrying enough wealth to purchase an entire nation. Nobody working the docks paid it much attention. This was simply another Tuesday in Lisbon, a city where fortunes arrived with such regularity that the arrival of another fortune barely registered as noteworthy. Ships bearing unimaginable riches pulled into harbor constantly, so frequently that the dock workers had long since stopped being impressed. This was the richest city on the continent of Europe. Some argued it was the wealthiest urban center anywhere in the known world. Fortune flowed through these streets like water through the Tees River itself. Yet, despite all this wealth pouring in from distant lands, human excrement still rained down from the windows of even the grandest houses. Gold and garbage coexisted in the same narrow alleys. Majesty and filth shared the same cobblestones. Tonight, if you could somehow travel backward through the centuries, if you could slip into the darkness of that October evening in 1754, you would find yourself walking these very streets. You would experience firsthand the sounds, the smells, the chaotic energy of a city at the height of its power. You might understand why losing such a place would break the hearts of people across an entire continent. Before we journey there, make yourself comfortable. Find whatever surface will support your body for the hours ahead. Sink into it. The bed you're about to inhabit in that distant year won't be comfortable. The straw that will serve as your mattress will crackle with every movement. The blanket covering you will scratch rather than soothe. But for now, rest easy in the knowledge that you're here, in your own time, listening to a story about a time when the earth itself became untrustworthy. If this tale of Lisbon's wild and terrible history keeps you company through the night, the subscribe button awaits your finger. I'm genuinely curious about where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is wherever you are in the world. The comments below exist for your voice, your story, your questions. Now let's begin. Darkness fills your small room on the third floor of a merchant's house in the Alhama district. You open your eyes to this darkness. It's October, in the year of our Lord 1754. You exist in this moment as Miguel, a young man of 17 years, servant in the household of Senor Cardoso, a man who accumulated his considerable fortune through the import and sale of silks originating from the Far East. The room you inhabit with two other servants is barely large enough to stand in. It's a cramped space, far too small for three people to sleep comfortably. Beneath your body lies straw, not a proper mattress filled with wool and cotton. This straw is packed into a rough canvas sack that shifts and crackles with every slight movement you make. The smell rising from it speaks of old sweat, animal musk, and the accumulated grime of months. A wool blanket covers you, coarse enough to irritate your skin, thin enough to allow the October chill to penetrate straight through to your bones. You've grown accustomed to this discomfort. 5 years of this existence stretches behind you. 5 years since your father, a fisherman from a village north of the city, sent you here as a boy to find employment and make your way in the world. 5 years of sleeping on straw has made it seem almost normal. 5 years of waking before the sun rises has become your natural rhythm. Through the tiny window beside your sleeping spot, barely large enough for your head to fit through, you observe the first light of morning touching the eastern sky. Gray light begins its slow transformation of the darkness. Somewhere in the house below you, a rooster has begun its morning announcement, its call piercing and insistent. Further away, church bells commence their morning ritual, their bronze voices calling the faithful to prayer. Lisbon never genuinely sleeps, you've learned. The city simply becomes quieter during the hours of darkness, but it definitely awakens in an angry mood. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is never gentle or kind. The city shakes itself awake like a dog shaking off water, agitated and impatient. You push yourself upright, being careful not to disturb the two men sharing your cramped quarters. Pedro, one of your roommates, snores with a sound like something dying slowly and painfully. He has been producing this particular sound for the 3 years you've known him. He also talks in his sleep, his voice muttering words that make sense only to him. Last night, he was apparently arguing with someone about the price of sardines. His passion on this imaginary topic was quite vivid. You've learned to tune both men out completely. It's a skill essential to survival in such close quarters. The stone floor strikes your bare feet with cold that seems to have soaked into the very material overnight. Even in October, even in a city famous for its mild climate, these stones hold the night's chill like a personal grudge. You reach for your clothes hung on a single nail driven into the wall. A simple shirt made of linen, patched twice at the elbows where your growing body has worn through the fabric. Breeches that were once brown but have faded to something closer to the color of mud. A vest that once belonged to the master's son before he outgrew it. You pull these items on without hesitation. Dressing in darkness has become second nature. The narrow wooden stairs leading down to the kitchen are steep and unforgiving. Each plank has been worn smooth by countless servants making this same journey over many years. The wood creaks familiarly beneath your weight, a song you've memorized perfectly. The third step groans loudly. The fifth step produces a distinctive squeak. The seventh step remains silent if you step carefully to the left side. The kitchen comes alive when you arrive. Maria, the cook, is already there. She's a woman of perhaps 50 or 60 years old, though nobody knows for certain and nobody asks. Some people say she came with the house itself, as much a permanent fixture as the foundations and as permanent as the rats that live in the walls. She stands at the great hearth, stirring something in an enormous iron pot. The firelight creates shadows across her face, deepening the lines around her eyes, emphasizing the permanent downward turn of her mouth. That frown seems carved into her features, a sculpture of decades spent in service. She speaks without looking up from her work. "You're late," she announces. "This is false. You're never late. You're never even slightly tardy." But Maria says this exact phrase every morning. It's how she says, "Good morning." It's her ritual, her way of beginning each day. The water, she says next, as if she hasn't already said the same thing every single day for the past 5 years. We need water. There it is. The first task of every day. The task that will define the rhythm of your entire day. Water. Understanding the significance of water. In 1754, Lisbon requires some explanation. This city represents the wealthiest location on the European continent, perhaps the wealthiest place in the entire world. Gold flows in from Brazil in quantities so vast they seem almost imaginary. Ships arrive daily from India and China and Africa, their holds crammed with spices and silks and porcelain and goods that the common people can barely imagine existing. The king inhabits a palace so dripping with treasures and luxuries that it barely seems real. Every church in the city glows with gold leaf, so much gold that the interiors shimmer like the interior of heaven itself. But running water in your residence, that's not something anyone has. Not the wealthy merchants, not the high-ranking nobles, not even the king himself. No one possesses such a luxury. Instead, public fountains are scattered throughout the city. Some of these fountains date back to when the Moors ruled this land, remnants of a civilization long gone. Others are newer, built in recent decades by the current king as a benevolent gift to his subjects. Every single morning, roughly half of the city's population walks to these fountains carrying buckets and barrels, waiting in lines to collect the water necessary for the day's cooking, washing, and drinking. Unless you're rich enough to pay someone else to do this work, that someone else is you. This is where you fit into the city's machine. You locate the wooden yoke that hangs beside the kitchen door. It's a simple device, 2 buckets attached to either end of a wooden pole that rests across your shoulders. This contraption allows you to carry water without completely destroying your arms. In theory, this makes the work manageable. In practice, your shoulders still ache intensely from yesterday's water runs, and the day before yesterday, and every day before that. The pain has become so constant you barely notice it anymore. The streets of the Alhama are already stirring as you step outside into the morning air. Lisbon is constructed on 7 distinct hills. The Alhama represents one of the oldest districts of this ancient city, a medieval maze that climbs upward from the riverfront toward the castle that watches over everything from above. These streets barely deserve to be called streets. They're more accurately described as suggestions, loose approximations of passageways that sometimes lead somewhere useful and sometimes lead to dead ends that serve no purpose whatsoever. Stairs appear without warning where you expected a flat street. Narrow archways connect buildings across alleys so thin you could stretch your arms wide and touch both walls simultaneously. The entire neighborhood was designed centuries ago by the Moors, planned deliberately to stay cool during the scorching summers and confusing to any invaders who might try to navigate it. They succeeded completely in both goals. You've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years now, walking these same paths repeatedly, and you still occasionally get lost. The stones beneath your feet are worn smooth by the footsteps of countless others who have walked this same route. Some of these stones are slick with substances you deliberately choose not to examine closely. The constant hazard is the human waste that rains down from above. The warning comes suddenly from a window high above. Agua vai, water goes. That's what people shout before they empty their chamber pots out the window. It's the polite version of look out below, though calling it polite is incredibly generous. The appropriate response to this warning is to flatten yourself against the nearest wall and pray you moved fast enough. This morning, you barely succeeded, jumping to the side just as a cascade of, well, let's simply say it was the city's waste disposal system in action. Agua vai is the name of this particular hazard, this danger that defines street life. The woman in the window above you doesn't apologize. She doesn't even glance downward. This is simply how things function. This is Lisbon. You continue your walk, stepping around puddles whose contents you deliberately refuse to examine or think about. The stench doesn't bother you anymore. Not really. Back when you first arrived in this city as a boy, you gagged constantly. The smell of Lisbon is actually famous throughout Europe, mentioned in travel journals, compared to open graves and rotting fish and hell itself. If hell had a significant sewer problem, after 5 years, you barely notice the smell anymore. Your nose has surrendered to it. Your brain has learned to filter it out as background noise. The fountain you're heading toward is called the Chafares del Rey, the King's Fountain. It's ancient, dating back at least to the 13th century. The water flows from springs somewhere in the hills above the city, traveling through ancient pipes that nobody fully understands anymore, medieval engineering that still functions. You're never the first person in line. You never are. By the time you arrive, perhaps 30 people stand ahead of you, mostly servants like yourself, some housewives, a few children who should probably be sleeping instead. One ancient man sits on the stone rim of the fountain basin every morning, watching the water flow endlessly, never seeming to fill any container, never apparently taking anything away. He's just there, watching, as though he's found something in the water that holds his complete attention. The sun begins its ascent above the hills to the east, transforming the sky from gray to gold. The water in the fountain catches this light, and for a brief moment it looks like liquid gold itself, which seems perfectly fitting. Gold is the reason this entire city exists, the reason everything else happens here. While you stand in line waiting, let me tell you something important about this city you're living in. Lisbon in 1754 is far more than just any city. It's the gateway to the entire world, the place where East meets West meets South and meets everywhere else. For the past 2 centuries, Portuguese ships have been sailing to places that no European had ever seen before. They sailed around Africa. They reached India. They discovered Brazil. They touched China and Japan and islands whose names you can barely pronounce even if someone taught them to you. Everything they found, everything they took, everything they traded for, all of it flows back here to Lisbon. It arrives at the docks along the Tees River. This river empties into the Atlantic Ocean just a few miles downstream. The numbers involved are almost impossible to comprehend. Nearly 1,000 tons of gold have arrived from Brazil in just the last 50 years. Millions of carats of diamonds, quantities so massive they've made the Portuguese king one of the richest men on the entire planet. Enough wealth to fund palaces and churches and fountains, entire ways of life built on the labor of people you'll never meet in places you'll never visit. Spices from India come in steady streams. Pepper and cinnamon and cloves that are worth more by weight than silver. Silks from China arrive in carefully packed crates, so fine they feel like water running through your fingers. Porcelain so delicate a loud voice might crack it. Everything comes through Lisbon. The city functions as a kind of living warehouse, a massive marketplace where the treasures of the entire globe change hands daily. You observe Dutch merchants negotiating with English traders. Italian bankers count their money. Hear a dozen different languages spoken on the streets. Faces from places you've only heard about in stories appear around every corner. And you, Miguel, you're simply a servant in a merchant's house, carrying water from a public fountain. This happens in the richest city on earth. The plumbing infrastructure hasn't yet caught up with the city's ambitions. The line inches forward slowly. A woman ahead of you argues with another woman about something involving a chicken. The details are unclear, but the volume is considerable. Lisbon voices carry, especially at dawn, especially when chickens are the subject. You shift the yoke on your shoulders, trying to find a position that doesn't make your muscles scream in protest. It's a futile effort. Every position hurts. A galgo passes you heading in the opposite direction. The water carriers are always recognizable. They're immigrants from Galicia in Spain, from the region just north of Portugal. The galagos are built for this work, or perhaps they've become built for it through years of doing it. They carry massive barrels on wooden frames strapped to their backs, loads so heavy they seem impossible. This particular one has a face bright red with effort, his neck corded with strain, yet he moves with a kind of grim efficiency that's impressive to witness. The gallows do work that would kill most men, carrying water up hills so steep that donkeys refuse to climb them, loading and unloading cargo that weighs more than they do, building structures, demolishing structures, hauling things. This city quite literally runs on their backs, built on their labor, and it pays them almost nothing for the privilege. They come from Galicia because the land there is divided into farms so tiny they can't feed a family, too poor to offer any future. So the young men leave. They walk south, cross into Portugal, and end up here doing the jobs nobody else will touch. There's an unspoken hierarchy among the water carriers themselves. The galos occupy the bottom rung. You with your simple yoke and 2 buckets, meant for a single household, sit slightly above them in this pyramid. The large houses employ servants who haul water for 30 or 40 or 50 people simultaneously. Somewhere in this pyramid of labor, everyone has someone to look down on. The fountain finally comes within reach. You fill your buckets carefully, try not to splash, try not to spill. Every drop that hits the ground represents water you'll have to carry again tomorrow. The walk back is harder than the walk there. You're heading uphill now. The yoke bites into your shoulders. The buckets swing with each step, throwing off your balance, threatening to pull you sideways into a wall or backward down a flight of stairs. While you struggle uphill with your water, let me tell you about the 5 things that transformed Lisbon into the wealthiest place on earth. First, the spices. We've covered this already. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, all flowing through the Indian port of Goa into Lisbon's warehouses. Portugal figured out the spice trade before anyone else did. For nearly 2 centuries, they've maintained control over it. Ships leave Lisbon, sail around Africa, reach Goa on India's western coast. They buy spices from local merchants, load them into their holds, and sail back. If the voyage succeeds and the ship survives, they sell their cargo in Lisbon for 10 times, 20 times, sometimes 50 times what they paid for it. The markup is almost criminal. But when you're the only game in town, you get to set the prices. Second, silk and porcelain from China through the port of Macau. Portuguese traders held a near monopoly on what people called white gold. These delicate Chinese cups and plates that every aristocratic house in Europe wanted on their tables. Every noble in Paris, every merchant in London, every prince in Germany, they all bought their porcelain through Lisbon. The markup was absolutely obscene. Third, the African trade. Portugal controls ports on Angola and Mozambique, on opposite coasts of the continent. This gives them dominance over the Atlantic trade winds. They funnel ivory, rare woods, and gold into Lisbon's coffers, and other things too. Human cargo, enslaved people by the thousands, shipped across the Atlantic to work the sugar plantations of Brazil. This part of the wealth doesn't glitter like gold. It's built on chains and suffering and blood. But it's part of the story whether we like it or not. Fourth, and this is the big one, the Brazilian gold. In 1695, someone found massive gold deposits in a region of Brazil called Minas Gerais. The name means general mines, and that turned out to be an understatement. A river of gold started flowing across the Atlantic. Nearly 1,000 tons of gold in the decades leading up to right now. Millions of carats of diamonds, enough wealth to make the Portuguese king one of the richest men on the planet. Enough to fund every palace, every church, every gilded chapel in the city. When people talk about Lisbon's golden age, they mean it, literally. The gold was real. The churches weren't painted gold. They were covered in it. Actual gold leaf applied by the square foot until the interiors glowed like they were on fire from the inside. Fifth, because of all this wealth, Lisbon became a magnet for thinkers and artists and scientists. The king invested in prestige. He built the most advanced aqueduct system in Europe. He gathered secret collections of nautical maps, the roteiros, charts showing the hidden routes to India and Brazil and the Spice Islands. These maps were the nuclear codes of their era. Countries would spy and kill and bribe to get their hands on them. Portugal guards them like the treasures they are. By 1750, Lisbon is the world's primary warehouse, its wealthiest creditor. The city where everything valuable passes through on its way somewhere else. And Miguel, carrying a letter for a silk merchant, is walking through the middle of it all, though he doesn't yet understand the significance of what surrounds him. You pass a church, then another church, then another. Lisbon has more churches than you can count, over 40 major ones, 90 convents and monasteries. The bells begin their constant ringing. A cascade of sound fills the valley between the hills, echoing off stone walls, becoming something like music. If you listen properly, the city is waking up properly now. Shutters open, voices call out. The smell of bread baking somewhere, the smell of fish frying somewhere else, the smell of everything. A varina passes you going the opposite direction, a fishwife. She carries a massive basket on her head, filled with sardines caught just this morning. She's barefoot, walking on the slick stones like they were a flat road. Her posture is perfect despite the weight. She's singing something, a working song. The words are about the sea, about the fish, about a lover who left and never came back. Varinas are the women who sell fish in Lisbon. They buy directly from the boats at dawn and carry their merchandise through the streets all day, calling out prices, haggling with housewives, keeping their baskets balanced on their heads through streets that would make a mountain goat nervous. They're known for their voices, for their colorful clothes, for their willingness to fight verbally or physically anyone who tries to cheat them. This particular one catches you looking and winks at you. Your face goes completely red. You nearly drop a bucket. She laughs, a real laugh that's not mocking, and keeps walking, her song fading as she rounds a corner and disappears into the maze of the Alama. You tell yourself to focus. Water. You're carrying water. The master's household needs water. By the time you return to the kitchen, the sun is fully up and the house is alive with activity. Maria takes the water without offering thanks. Of course, she doesn't. She pours it into the great stone basin by the hearth, where it will be used for cooking, for washing, for everything a household needs water for. You'll make this exact same trip 3 more times today, maybe 4, if the master's wife decides to wash her hair. But first, there's breakfast. Breakfast for a servant in a Lisbon household is not exactly abundant. There's bread, day old, usually hard enough to break a tooth if you're not careful. You dip it in whatever's left of last night's soup to soften it. Sometimes there's a bit of cheese. Sometimes a sardine if the cook is feeling generous. Today, there's bread and watered wine. The wine is cheap, almost vinegar, but it's safer to drink than the water in most parts of the city. Even the water from the fountains becomes suspect after it's been sitting in a bucket for a few hours. You eat standing up, leaning against the wall of the kitchen, watching Maria prepare the master's breakfast. That's a completely different affair. Fresh bread still warm from the baker down the street. Eggs, sliced ham imported from somewhere in the north. Fruit that you can't name, but that smells like summer, captured in solid form. Coffee, real coffee from Brazil. A luxury that costs more per pound than a servant makes in a month. You don't feel jealous exactly. This is simply how things function. The master eats like a king because the master is rich. You eat bread and watered wine because you are not. The world makes sense this way, even if the sense it makes isn't particularly fair or just. Pedro stumbles into the kitchen, still half asleep, his hair sticking up in approximately 17 different directions. He grabs a piece of bread without asking and stuffs half of it in his mouth before Maria can object. The master wants you, he says to you, spraying crumbs everywhere, upstairs now. You swallow the last of your bread. You wipe your hands on your breeches. You try to make yourself look presentable, or at least not actively offensive. The master's study is on the second floor. It's a room filled with things you've never been allowed to touch. Maps on the walls showing places with names you can't pronounce. A globe that sits on a wooden stand, spinning freely when you accidentally brush against it. Books, dozens of them bound in leather, their spines marked with gold lettering in languages you can't read. Señor Cardoso is sitting behind his desk when you enter. He's a man of perhaps 45 years, with a beard going gray at the edges and eyes that always seem to be calculating something. He made his fortune in the silk trade, buying from Portuguese merchants in Macau and selling to aristocrats across Europe. He's not noble, not technically, but he lives like one, he dresses like one, he certainly eats like one. Miguel, he says, not looking up from the papers on his desk, I have an errand for you. An errand? This could mean anything. The last errand sent you to a ship captain who turned out to be in a tavern in the worst part of the city. You came back with a black eye and a newfound respect for sailors' fists. Yes, senor, I need you to go to the Ribera. There's a ship arriving today from Goa, the São Bento. Find the captain, a man named Fernandez. Tell him I'll meet him at the factor's house tomorrow at noon. Give him this. He folds the paper, drips wax, presses his ring into it. The wax is red, stamped with the Cardoso family symbol, a design that looks vaguely like a sailing ship if you squint at it. Do not lose it, the master says. Do not open it. Do not let anyone else read it. If you fail in this, you will find yourself sleeping in the streets by nightfall. Do you understand? You understand. You always understand. These errands are tests as much as tasks. The master is watching. The master is always watching. He started as a servant himself. They say he knows all the tricks, all the ways a young man can fail. Yes, senor, the Ribera, the São Bento, Captain Fernandez, tomorrow at noon. Go, you go. As you walk out into the bright October morning, letter tucked carefully inside your shirt, You have absolutely no idea that you're living in the final year of Lisbon as anyone knows it. No idea that in just over 12 months, on a holy day in November, the world will shake and the sea will rise and the fire will consume everything you've ever known. The walk from the Alhama down to the Ribera takes about 20 minutes if you know the shortcuts. Miguel knows the shortcuts. He's been running errands through these streets since he was 12 years old. Every crooked alley, every steep staircase, every dead end that looks like a through street but isn't. The trick is to head downhill and keep the river in sight. Eventually, gravity does most of the work. As he descends, the character of the city changes noticeably. The cramped houses of the Alhama give way to something grander and more refined. The streets become wider. The buildings rise taller. Shops display goods in windows with actual glass, showing merchandise that Miguel couldn't afford even with 3 lifetimes of wages. And then he rounds a corner, and there it is, the Tagus. Even after 5 years in Lisbon, the river still takes his breath away. It's massive, beyond comprehension, so wide that the far shore looks like a different country entirely. This morning, with the sun climbing higher and the mist burning off the water's surface, the whole thing glitters like someone scattered diamonds across it. But the river isn't what stops him completely. The ships do. There must be 100 of them, maybe more, anchored in the harbor, crowding the docks, their masts rising like a forest of bare winter trees. The phrase, forest of masts, has become a cliché, the way people describe busy ports. But standing here looking at this, Miguel understands completely why people use that description. You could almost walk from one side of the harbor to the other, just by jumping from deck to deck. The ships aren't all identical. That's the first thing you notice when you look carefully. There are the big ones, the carracks and galleons that sailed to India and Brazil. Their hulls painted bright colors, their sails furled but massive. Then the smaller caravels, sleeker and faster, built for coastal trade. Fishing boats cluster near the shore, barely more than rowboats with nets attached. Scattered among them are foreign vessels, Dutch floats, and English merchantmen, their flags snapping in the breeze. The whole world, it seems, wants to be in Lisbon's harbor. The docks themselves are absolute chaos. Beautiful, terrifying, stinking chaos. Men swarm over everything, loading and unloading, shouting in at least a dozen different languages. Miguel can pick out Portuguese, obviously, and the rough Galician of the laborers, but there's also Dutch, which sounds like someone clearing their throat. English, flat and nasal. Italian, musical even when the speaker is angry. And other languages he can't identify at all. African tongues and something that might be Arabic, all mixing together into a wall of sound that's almost overwhelming. The smell is incredible, and not in a positive way. The docks combine the worst of Lisbon's normal stench with the added bonus of rotting fish, tar, sweat from 1,000 unwashed bodies, and the particular funk of cargo that's been sitting in a ship's hold for months. Spices cut through occasionally, the sharp sweetness of cinnamon, or the bite of pepper. But mostly, it's just human. The smell of too many people doing too much work in too small a space. Miguel weaves through the crowd, clutching Señor Cardoso's letter inside his shirt. Getting pickpocketed here would be easy. The docks are full of people who make their living by taking things from people who aren't paying attention. He's paying attention, though. He's learned to be. A galgo brushes past him, carrying what looks like half a tree on his back. The man's face is bright red, his neck corded with strain, but he moves with a kind of grim efficiency. No wasted motion, no stopping to rest, just one foot in front of the other over and over until the job is done. The Galagos do work that would kill most men, carrying water up hills so steep that donkeys refuse to climb them, loading and unloading cargo that weighs more than they do, building things, breaking things, hauling things. The city runs on their backs, literally, and pays them almost nothing for the privilege. They come from Galicia, in northwestern Spain, just across the border. The land there is divided into tiny farms, too small to feed a family, too poor to offer any future. So the young men leave. They walk south, cross into Portugal, and end up here in Lisbon, doing the jobs nobody else will do. They speak their own language among themselves. It sounds like Portuguese if you don't listen too closely, close enough to understand most of it, but with different music, different rhythm. The Portuguese look down on them, call them names, blame them when things go wrong, and then hire them anyway, because who else is going to carry all this weight? Miguel watches a group of them unloading barrels from a cart. Their movements are synchronized, practiced. One man lifts, another guides, a third stacks. They don't speak. They don't need to. After years of this work, their bodies know what to do. One of them catches Miguel looking. Their eyes meet. Two young men, both far from home, both doing work that grinds down the body one day at a time. The galgo nods almost imperceptibly. Miguel nods back. Then the moment passes, and they both return to their tasks. Miguel finds the harbor master's station, a wooden shack near the edge of the main dock. A bored-looking clerk sits inside scratching something in a massive leather-bound book. "I'm looking for the Sao Bento," Miguel says, "arriving from Goa. Captain Fernandez." The clerk doesn't look up from his work. Goa ships dock at Pier 7 down there. He waves vaguely toward the end of the harbor. Pier 7 is packed with activity. Of course it is. A ship from Goa isn't just any ship. It's carrying spices, and spices in 1754 are worth more by weight than gold. People tend to forget this in modern times. Pepper is cheap. Cinnamon is something you sprinkle on toast. But back then, getting spices from the places where they grow to the places where people want them involved, sailing halfway around the world through waters full of pirates and storms and 100 other ways to die. Most ships that left for India didn't come back. The ones that did return carried fortunes in their holds. A single successful voyage to Goa could make a man rich for the rest of his life. A single shipwreck could bankrupt a family for generations. Portugal figured this out before anyone else did. For nearly 2 centuries, they've controlled the spice trade. Ships leave Lisbon, sail around Africa, reach Goa on India's western coast. They buy pepper and cinnamon and cloves from local merchants, load it all into their holds, and sail back. If they survive the journey, they sell their cargo in Lisbon for 10, 20, sometimes 50 times what they paid for it. The markup is almost criminal. But when you're the only game in town, you get to set the prices. It's the first truly global economy, and Lisbon sits at the center of it like a spider in a web, pulling wealth from every corner of the known world. Miguel finds the Sao Bento. It's there, looking tired from its long journey. The paint on its hull is faded and salt-stained. The sails are patched in several places, but the armed guards standing at the gangplank tell you everything you need to know about what's in that hold. Nobody guards garbage. Miguel approaches carefully. The guards are big men weathered by sun and sea, with the kind of faces that suggest they've seen violence and didn't mind it. "I have a message for Captain Fernandez," Miguel says, trying to sound more confident than he feels. "From Señor Cardoso." One of the guards looks him over, takes in the patched shirt, the muddy breeches, the vest that clearly used to belong to someone else. "Wait here," the guard says. Miguel waits. The sun beats down on the dock. The smell of tar and fish and human sweat settles around him like a blanket. Somewhere nearby, two men are arguing in what sounds like Italian. Somewhere else, a woman is singing a working song, her voice high and clear above the noise of the harbor. The guard returns with a man who must be Captain Fernandez. He's shorter than Miguel expected. Most sailors are. The ceilings on ships aren't built for tall people. But his arms are thick and his eyes are sharp, and he carries himself like someone used to giving orders. "You're from Cardoso?" the captain asks. "Yes, Captain. He asked me to give you this." Miguel produces the letter from inside his shirt. Fernandez takes it, turns it over, examines the wax seal, then to Miguel's relief, nods. "Tell your master I'll be there, and tell him the cargo is better than expected." The pepper prices in Goa were favorable. Miguel has no idea what that means. He doesn't care. The message is delivered. His job is done. "Yes, Captain. Thank you, Captain." He backs away, turns, and starts the long walk back through the docks. The journey home takes him past the Ribera itself, the royal waterfront, the palace. He's never been inside. Obviously, servants don't enter palaces unless they're palace servants. But he's seen it from the outside, and even that is enough to stop him in his tracks every time. The Ribera Palace is not one building. It's a whole complex of buildings sprawling along the waterfront, white walls gleaming in the sun. It's been the home of Portuguese kings for 250 years. If you want to understand what Portuguese power looks like, this is it. The towers rise above the waterfront. The windows catch the light and throw it back out again. Guards stand at attention near the gates, their uniforms crisp despite the heat. Somewhere inside, officials are meeting about matters of state, trade agreements, military alliances, the price of pepper in Amsterdam. Right outside, maybe 50 feet from those pristine white walls, a man is urinating against a building while two dogs fight over a fish head. That's Lisbon for you. The palace and the piss, the gold and the garbage. They exist side by side, always, everywhere. Miguel knows there's a library inside those walls with 70,000 books. He's heard about the paintings by masters whose names he can barely pronounce. Titian, Rubens, Carlo. The archives of the Age of Discovery are kept there, maps showing routes to places that most Europeans can't even imagine. And there are the clerks, the administrators, the bureaucrats who track every grain of pepper, every bar of gold, every bolt of silk that passes through this city. The palace isn't just a home for the king, it's the brain of an empire that stretches from South America to Indonesia. The king himself, John V, has spent money here like water, like air, like something that would never run out. He didn't just want to be a king, he wanted to be the most Catholic king, the most apostolic. He paid the Pope for special titles. He turned the royal chapel into a cave of gold and silver. Every surface shimmers. Every candelabra is worth more than a peasant family would earn in a dozen generations. He died 4 years ago. His son Jose rules now, quieter, more reserved, less interested in Baroque excess, and more interested in practical matters like trade and defense. But the palace remains. The gold remains. The empire keeps grinding forward. Ships arrive and depart. Wealth flows in like water. Miguel stops at a fountain to drink. The water is cold and clean, and for a moment, standing in the shadow of the Ribera Palace with the river spreading out before him, he feels something close to wonder. This city, this impossible, stinking, beautiful city, where gold and garbage flow in the same streets, where you can see the treasures of a dozen civilizations and step in human waste on the same block. He doesn't belong here, not really. He's a fisherman's son from a village up the coast, and someday maybe he'll go back there, marry a local girl, have children who've never seen a galleon or smelled cinnamon or dodged the contents of a chamber pot. But not yet. For now, he lives in Lisbon. He carries water and runs errands and sleeps on straw. He watches the ships come and go. He sees the marinas with their baskets of fish, and the galagos with their impossible burdens, and the merchants in their fine clothes. He thinks this is the center of the world. He doesn't know it's all going to end. He doesn't know about the fault line running beneath his feet, the pressure building in the earth for centuries, the disaster coiling like a spring, waiting for the day it will release. He doesn't know that the palace behind him will vanish completely, that the library with its 70,000 books will burn, that the maps and the paintings and the gold will become ash and rubble. All he knows is that the sun is warm, the water is cold, and he has the rest of the afternoon to fill before the day's work is done. He takes another long drink from the fountain. Then he starts the long climb back up the hill toward the Alhambra, toward the merchant's house, toward the life that he thinks will last forever. The stairs are brutal, going uphill. They always are. His legs burned by the third flight, his lungs by the fifth. The morning's water carrying hasn't helped his physical state. His shoulders still ache from the yoke, but the view as he climbs keeps getting better. The harbor spreads out below him, the forest of masts, the colored sails, the tiny figures of dock workers moving cargo like ants. Beyond them, the Tagus, wide and blue and shimmering, and beyond that, the sea, the Atlantic, the road to everywhere. A Verena passes him on the stairs, heading down with an empty basket. Her work for the morning is done. Fish sold, pockets a little heavier. She's singing to herself, not the working song from earlier, something softer, a love song maybe, or a lullaby. Miguel presses himself against the wall to let her pass. The staircase is narrow, their shoulders nearly touch. She smells like fish and salt and something else. Flowers, maybe. Some women wear sachets of dried lavender to mask the working smells. This one apparently does. Long climb, she says, not quite looking at him. Always is. She laughs, a real laugh, not mocking. Gets easier eventually. Does it? No. She grins. I lied. It never gets easier. You just get stronger. And then she's past him, moving down the stairs with the easy grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times before, her empty basket swinging on her hip. Miguel watches her go for a moment longer than he should. Then he turns and keeps climbing. A year passes. That's how time works when you're young and poor and busy. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Before you know it, a whole year has gone by. Miguel is 18 now, taller, stronger. The water barrels that used to make his arms scream are just weight now. His calluses have calluses. His shoulders have broadened from hauling buckets up hills that never get any shorter. He knows the city now. Not like a local, not really, but well enough. He knows which streets flood when it rains, which corners to avoid after dark, which fountain has the coldest water, and which one has the longest lines. He knows the shortcuts through the Alhambra, the steep staircases that tourists don't know exist. He knows the people, too. The Verena, who always smiles at him. The galgo named Francisco, who taught him how to balance the yoke properly. The baker on Rueda dos Belos Heroes, who sometimes gives him the bread that's too old to sell. The priest at São Miguel, who nods when Miguel passes, even though they've never exchanged a word. A year of small accumulations, a year of small survivals, the kind of year that doesn't feel like much when you're living it, but means everything when you look back. He survived one winter, the cold that crept into the servants' quarters and never quite left. The mornings when the water in the bucket had a skin of ice. The way his fingers cracked and bled until Maria showed him how to rub tallow into them to make it bearable. He survived one summer. The heat that turned Lisbon into an oven, the stench that rose from the streets like a living thing, the fever that swept through the Alhambra and took 4 people from their street. Not anyone Miguel knew well, just neighbors, just faces he passed. He survived another autumn, and now it's the last day of October, 1755. Tomorrow is All Saints' Day. This is the biggest religious holiday of the year, bigger than Easter, some say. The day when the church honors all the saints, known and unknown. The whole heavenly host gathered together for one massive celebration. Every Catholic in Lisbon will be in church tomorrow morning. That's not an exaggeration. That's just what you do. The city is preparing for this momentous occasion. Miguel notices it everywhere as he makes his morning water run. The churches are being cleaned thoroughly. Priests are directing servants to sweep floors, polish brass, arrange flowers. The altars are being decorated with lace and gold and all the finest things the church owns, which is quite a lot. And the candles, God, the candles, they're everywhere, thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Every church in Lisbon is stocking up for tomorrow's services. Beeswax candles for the rich parishes, tallow candles for the poor ones, candles in boxes, candles in bundles, candles being carried through the streets by boys younger than Miguel. He watches 2 boys stagger past with a crate between them. The crate is stuffed with white candles packed in straw. The boys are maybe 10, 11 years old. Their faces are red with effort. At the Chafaras del Rey, the talk is all about the holiday. My wife's been cooking for 3 days, one of the galagos complains. His name is Francisco. He's a big man, with arms like tree trunks and a voice that carries. Says we need to feed everyone who visits after Mass. Everyone, her entire family, my entire family, half the neighborhood. At least you have a wife, another man says. This one is younger, newer. Miguel doesn't know his name yet. Some days, that's not the blessing you think it is. Laughter, easy, tired laughter. The kind men make when they're too exhausted for anything sharper. What about you? Francisco asks Miguel. Your household doing something for the feast? Mass at São Roque. Then a meal. The senora wants everyone there? São Roque. Francisco whistles. Fancy church. Rich people's church. We're not rich. We just work for them. Same thing to God, I suppose. Francisco fills his barrel. Huh. Though I've noticed God seems to prefer the company of rich people. Their churches are always nicer. This gets more laughter. Even Miguel smiles. There's a freedom in these moments at the fountain, a space where men can say things they wouldn't dare say elsewhere, where the hierarchy loosens just enough to breathe. Miguel fills his barrels and heads back up the hill. The morning is cool. October has turned the air crisp, and there's a clarity to the light that only comes this time of year. The sky is very blue, very empty. He passes the sea cathedral. Inside, workers are hanging banners. He can hear the choir practicing. The sound drifts out into the street like something holy trying to escape. Latin words he doesn't understand, lifted by voices he'll never have. Tomorrow, this cathedral will be packed, standing room only. People pressed together so tight you can barely breathe. The air will be thick with incense and sweat and devotion. Thousands of candles burning on the altar, their flames making the gold shimmer like it's alive. Miguel has been inside the Say exactly twice. Once for the funeral of a neighbor, once because someone dared him to. It's the kind of place that makes you feel small. The ceilings are so high they seem to hold up heaven itself. The stone is so old it remembers things you can't imagine. At the Cardoso house, the preparations are quieter, but just as thorough. Senora Cardoso is having one of her better days. She's actually come downstairs, which happens maybe once a week now. She's directing the servants to prepare the house for the holiday. Fresh flowers in every room. The good tablecloth, the one that only comes out for special occasions. "We'll attend the early Mass at Sal Rock," she announces. "The whole household, everyone presentable. This means Miguel will have to wear the shirt he's been saving, the one without holes, the one Maria washed last week and made him put away for special." "Even the servants?" Pedro asks. "Even the servants," she says. "On All Saints' Day, we're all equal before God." Miguel doesn't say what he's thinking, which is that if they're all equal before God, maybe they should be equal on the other 364 days too. He's learned that thinking like that doesn't help anything. It just makes you tired. Maria is in the kitchen as always. She's baking something that smells like heaven, bread with honey and cinnamon, the kind they only make for holidays. The warm scent fills the whole house, drifting up the stairs, through the rooms, making even the cold corners feel hospitable. "Big day tomorrow," Miguel says. "Every day is a big day when you're old enough to know how few you have left," Maria replies. "That's cheerful." Maria shrugs. The motion is slower than it used to be. She's gotten older this year. Or maybe Miguel just notices it more now. Her hair is grayer, her hands more gnarled, the stoop in her shoulders more pronounced. "It's true," Maria continues. "I've seen 60 All Saints' Days, maybe 61. I've lost count. Each one I think maybe this is the last. And so far I've been wrong, but someday I'll be right. Can we talk about something less depressing? What's depressing about it? Death comes for everyone, rich and poor, saints and sinners. The only question is when and how." She slides a loaf into the oven. Better to face it than pretend it's not coming. There's something in her voice today. Something Miguel can't quite name. It's been there for a few weeks now. A heaviness like she's carrying something she can't put down. "Maria, is everything all right?" he asks. She looks at him. Those old eyes, the ones that have seen so much. Births and deaths, weddings and funerals, kings rising and falling, wars beginning and ending. All of it reflected in those tired, knowing eyes. "I had a dream last night," she says finally. "A bad one." "What kind of dream?" "The kind you don't talk about." She turns back to her dough, kneading it with a force that seems unnecessary, working something out that has nothing to do with bread. "Just a dream," she continues. "Old women have them." Doesn't mean anything, but she won't meet his eyes. and her hands, when she kneads the dough, are shaking slightly. "Maria, don't!" Her voice becomes sharper now, almost angry. "I said it doesn't mean anything. Dreams are just dreams. The mind playing tricks. Go make yourself useful somewhere." Miguel wants to ask more. The question sits on his tongue like a stone, but Pedro comes in looking for lunch. And the moment passes, and Maria's back becomes a wall that won't let him through. November 1st, 1755. The morning begins like any other All Saints' Day morning. Miguel is shaken awake by Maria before dawn. His eyes don't want to open, his body doesn't want to move, but Maria's voice doesn't leave room for argument. "Up," she says. "Mass is in an hour. If you're late, I'll tell Senora Cardoso you were drunk last night." "I wasn't drunk," he protests. She doesn't know that. Miguel drags himself out of bed. The air is cold. October has become November overnight, and you can feel it. His breath makes small clouds in the darkness of the servants' quarters. The straw beneath him has molded to the shape of his body over the past year, and leaving it feels like leaving something important behind. Pedro is already awake, splashing water on his face from a basin. The water must be freezing. Pedro gasps and curses under his breath, then remembers it's a holy day and crosses himself. Yao is still trying to negotiate with consciousness. He's pulled his blanket over his head like a child, as if that might make the morning go away. Maria stands in the doorway like a general surveying her troops. The pre-dawn light from the kitchen fire behind her makes her look larger than she is, more solid, like something that has always been there and always will be. "Clean shirts, all of you," she commands. "And for the love of God, comb your hair. We're representing this household." Miguel puts on his good shirt, the one without holes. It's slightly too small now, tight across the shoulders, and the sleeves don't quite reach his wrists anymore. A year of hauling water has changed his body in ways he doesn't think about until moments like this. But it's clean. That's what matters. He runs his fingers through his hair. There's no mirror, no candle. He's learned to do this in the dark. The tangles are significant. He works at them until his scalp aches. "Good enough," Maria says, inspecting him. "You look almost respectable." The household assembles in the entrance hall just as the sky begins to lighten. Senor Cardoso is dressed in his finest coat, the one with the gold buttons that probably cost more than Miguel will earn in 5 years. Senora Cardoso wears black as always, but today it's a better quality of black. Expensive black mourning that costs money. Her face is pale and drawn, but she's standing on her own, which is more than Miguel expected. "Sal Rock," Senor Cardoso announces. "Stay together. Stay quiet. Remember who you represent." They walk through the streets of Lisbon in the gray light of early morning. The city is already stirring. Other households are making the same journey, heading toward their chosen churches. Some go to the Say Cathedral, some to Caro Convent, some to one of the 40 other churches scattered across the city. Everyone is going somewhere. That's what strikes Miguel as they walk. The streets are full of people, all moving in the same direction, toward God, toward prayer, toward whatever comfort the church can offer on this day of remembering the dead. Nobles encourage past servants on foot. Children chase each other between the legs of adults. Old women in black shawls shuffle along, rosary beads clicking in their hands. A priest hurries past, late for his own service. 200,000 people all heading to church at the same time, the whole city emptying into the houses of God. Sow Rock Church sits on the hillside, its plain facade hiding the golden interior. By the time the Cardoso household arrives, the church is already filling up. Bodies press against bodies. The smell of incense mingles with the smell of unwashed humanity. The perfume of the rich and the sweat of the poor all mixed together. Hundreds of candles burn on the altar, their flames dancing in the draft from the open doors. More candles line the walls, the window sills, every available surface. The whole church glows with fire. The choir is warming up. Their voices rise toward the ceiling. Latin words that Miguel doesn't understand, but that feel holy. Anyway, the music seems to hold the whole church in its hands, lifting it up toward heaven. Miguel finds himself pressed between Pedro and a woman he doesn't know. A merchant's wife, maybe, from the look of her clothes. There's barely room to breathe. The candles make the air warm and thick. Sweat begins to gather at his hairline, trickling down his temple. He counts the people around him. Hundreds, maybe 1,000, all packed into this one building, all standing or kneeling on stone that was laid centuries ago. The service begins. The priest's voice echoes through the nave. More Latin, more ritual. The congregation stands, sits, kneels, stands again. Miguel follows along, doing what everyone else does, mouthing words he doesn't know. His knees ache from the stone floor. His stomach growls. Time passes in that strange churchway where minutes stretch and hours compress. The priest talks about saints and salvation and the promise of heaven. The choir sings. The candles burn. Miguel's mind wanders. He thinks about breakfast. Maria promised food after Mass. Real food. Holiday food. His stomach growls louder at the thought. The merchant's wife gives him a disapproving look. He thinks about the year that's passed, the water runs, the fountain, the night in Bro Alto, when he almost died. The way the city has become home or something like it, the small joys and the constant work, and the way you stop noticing the smell after a while. He thinks about Maria's dream, the one she wouldn't describe, the heaviness in her voice, the way she looked at him like she was seeing something he couldn't. The priest is saying something about judgment, about God's will, about how the faithful will be saved and the wicked will be punished. Miguel shifts his weight from one foot to the other. His legs are getting tired. He wishes he could sit down, but the benches are only for the wealthy, and servants stand in the back. Outside, through the open doors, he can hear the bells of other churches ringing across the city. A chorus of bronze voices, all singing the same song. It's a perfect morning for worship. Clear sky, cool air, the whole city united in prayer. And then the floor moves. At first, he thinks he imagined it. A tremor, a shudder, like someone bumped into him from behind, but no one bumped into him. He looks around. Other people are looking around too. Confused faces, nervous faces. The floor moves again, harder this time. The priests stop speaking mid-sentence. The choir stops singing. For one long moment, the church is silent, except for the sound of candles sputtering in the sudden draft. Then the world comes apart. The shaking starts low and deep, like something enormous is waking up beneath them. The floor bucks. The walls groan. The candles on the altar topple one after another, their flames catching the cloth and the flowers and the sacred vestments. People start to scream. Miguel doesn't remember falling, but suddenly he's on his knees. The stone floor is vibrating so hard his teeth rattle. He can't stand. He can't think. All he can do is hold on to something, anything. But there's nothing to hold on to. The noise is unbelievable. Stone grinding against stone, wood cracking, glass shattering, and underneath it all, a roar that seems to come from the earth itself. A sound like the world ending. How long? How long has it been? Seconds, minutes. It feels like hours. It feels like forever. Chunks of ceiling are falling now, not the whole roof, not yet, but pieces, plaster and stone raining down on the congregation. Someone near Miguel is hit. He sees blood. He sees a woman's face, frozen in shock, and then she's gone, buried under rubble. He has to get out. That's the only thought left in his head. Get out, get out, get out. He crawls. The floor is still shaking, but crawling is easier than walking. His hands find other hands, other bodies, some moving and some not. He doesn't stop to help. He can't. The survival part of his brain has taken over, and it doesn't care about anything except getting out. The door, he can see it. It's still there, still open. Daylight pouring through like a promise. He crawls toward it. Something falls behind him. Something big. The crash makes the whole building shudder. He doesn't look back. He keeps crawling, and then somehow he's outside. The shaking hasn't stopped. He throws himself against the nearest wall and holds on. The street is full of people, all of them screaming, all of them running or crawling or lying still on the cobblestones. Buildings are falling. He watches a house collapse across the street, folding in on itself like it was made of paper. Dust rises in a great cloud. Someone is trapped underneath. He can hear them screaming. He can't help them. He can barely help himself. The shaking goes on. 3 minutes, 4, 5, 6. An eternity measured in terror. And then finally, it stops. The silence that follows is almost worse than the noise. For a long moment, nothing moves, nothing sounds. The whole city holds its breath. Then the crying starts, the moaning, the calls for help. Miguel pushes himself away from the wall. His legs are shaking, his whole body is shaking, but the ground isn't. Not anymore. He looks back at Sal Rock. The church is still standing, damaged, but standing. The plain facade that he'd walked through just an hour ago now has cracks running through it like veins. But the roof hasn't collapsed. The walls haven't fallen, not like some of the other churches. He can see the Carrow Convent from here, higher on the hill. Its roof is gone, just gone, open to the sky like a broken skull. People are emerging from the rubble everywhere, some walking, some crawling, some being carried by others. Their faces are gray with dust and shock. Their clothes are torn. Their bodies are bleeding. Miguel searches the crowd for familiar faces. He finds Pedro first, sitting on the ground near the church door, staring at nothing. His shirt is torn. There's blood on his face, but it doesn't seem to be his. Pedro. No response. Pedro. The older servant looks up. His eyes take a moment to focus. Miguel, are you hurt? I don't know. I don't think so. Where were the others? Pedro shakes his head. He doesn't know. Miguel leaves him there and keeps searching. Yao is nearby, helping an old woman who fell. Maria is standing in the middle of the street, looking up at the sky like she's waiting for something else to fall. Maria, he says. She turns. Her face is calm, too calm, like she expected this. The Senora. We need to find the Senora. They search. It takes time. The street is chaos, bodies everywhere, living and dead mixed together. The screaming has faded to a low, constant moan, the sound of a whole city in pain. A child wanders past, calling for her mother. Her dress is torn and her face is bloody. Miguel reaches for her, but she slips away into the crowd, still calling. An old man sits against a collapsed wall, holding something to his chest. It takes Miguel a moment to realize it's a clock. Just a clock. The man is holding it like it's the most precious thing in the world. "Have you seen a woman in black?" Miguel asks him. "Older, with a man who can't walk?" The old man doesn't answer. He just keeps holding his clock. They find Señor Cardoso first. He's alive but injured. His leg is bent at an angle that makes Miguel's stomach turn. He can't walk. Two other men, strangers, are carrying him toward an open space away from the buildings. His face is gray with pain, but he's not screaming. Maybe he's past screaming. Señora Cardoso is beside him. She's unhurt physically at least, but her eyes have that empty look, the look of someone who has lost everything and knows it. "The house," she keeps saying. "We have to go back to the house. My son's things are there, my son's room. We have to save my son's room. Her son has been dead for 3 years, but right now she's not in this moment. She's somewhere else entirely." "Not yet," Maria says firmly. "Not until we know it's safe." But nowhere is safe. That's what Miguel is starting to understand. The buildings that are still standing might fall any moment. The ground might shake again. The world has proven itself untrustworthy, and nothing will ever feel solid again. He looks down at his hands. They're bleeding. He didn't notice. He must have cut them crawling over the broken stone. The blood is bright red against the gray dust that covers everything. Someone shouts something about the river. The river? The Tagus. The only open space big enough to hold everyone. The only place without buildings to collapse on your head. People start moving that direction. A slow, limping migration of the living, carrying the injured, leaving the dead. Some people are praying out loud as they walk. Others are completely silent, too shocked to make a sound. Miguel helps carry Señor Cardoso. The man is heavy, and the streets are blocked with rubble in places. They have to climb over collapsed walls, step around bodies, avoid the buildings that are still groaning, still threatening to fall. Every few minutes, something else collapses. A wall, a roof, a chimney. Each crash sends people scrambling, ducking, covering their heads. Each crash brings fresh screams. The narrow streets of the Alhama, the streets Miguel has walked 1,000 times, are unrecognizable. Buildings have leaned into each other, creating tunnels of debris. The cobblestones are cracked and heaved. In some places, the ground has split open entirely, revealing dark gaps that could swallow a man. The smell of smoke reaches Miguel before he sees the fire. Somewhere behind them, something is burning. The candles, all those thousands of candles that were lit for All Saints' Day, they've fallen into the ruins. They've caught the wood and the cloth and the paper. They've started something that no one can stop. The smoke is already spreading, black and gray and brown, rising into the clear November sky. By nightfall, Miguel thinks the whole city will be burning, but that's a problem for later. Right now, the only thing that matters is reaching the river. They reach the Ribeira, the open space where the waterfront meets the palace, except the palace isn't there anymore. Or rather, it is, but it's wrong. Parts of it have collapsed. The great tower that Miguel used to see from the fountain is leaning at an angle that defies belief. The walls are cracked. The windows are empty holes. The glory of Portugal reduced to rubble. The 70,000 books in the Royal Library, the maps that charted the world, the paintings by masters whose names Miguel doesn't know but Maria once mentioned, all of it gone or burning or buried. Thousands of people have gathered here on the stone quays. The survivors, the lucky ones. They stand shoulder to shoulder, looking back at the city they just escaped from. Some are praying, some are crying, some are just staring, unable to process what they're seeing. A priest is giving last rites to a dying man. A woman is screaming a name over and over. A child sits alone, completely silent, his eyes fixed on nothing. This is what the end of the world looks like, Miguel thinks. Not fire from heaven, not angels with swords, just people covered in dust waiting to see if they live or die. Lisbon is destroyed. That's the only way to describe it. The city that was the richest in Europe, the gateway to the world, the beating heart of an empire, is destroyed. Buildings lie in ruins. Churches have collapsed. Smoke is rising from a dozen different places. The fires are spreading. Somewhere out there, the sea cathedral has fallen. The Caro convent has fallen. The houses where people woke up this morning expecting nothing more than a holy day and a good meal have fallen. Tens of thousands are dead, maybe more. No one will ever know the real number. And it's not over. Someone near Miguel points at the water. Look at the river. Miguel looks. The Tagus is retreating. That's the only word for it. The water is pulling back from the shore, revealing mud and sand and the keels of ships that have been sitting there for years. The riverbed is suddenly visible, littered with lost cargo and ancient wrecks. Fish flop helplessly in the sudden shallows. Crabs scuttle across the exposed bottom. It's the strangest thing Miguel has ever seen. The river that has been the lifeblood of this city for centuries, the river that brought the gold and the spices and the silk, is disappearing before their eyes. For a moment, people actually cheer. Some of them run toward the exposed riverbed. They see the glint of metal in the mud, the promise of treasure. Gold coins, maybe, or silver. Something valuable, something they can use to rebuild. Men and women who just escaped death are now wading into the mud, reaching for whatever they can find. Free money, someone shouts. The river's giving up its dead. But Maria grabs Miguel's arm. Her grip is like iron. Her fingers dig into his flesh hard enough to leave bruises. Run, she says. What? Run now. Up the hill as high as you can get. Why? What's happening? Maria's face is white, whiter than the dust that covers everything. Her eyes are wide, and in them Miguel sees something he's never seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that goes beyond thought. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and ancient. The sea, she whispers. The sea is coming back. Miguel doesn't understand, but he trusts Maria. He's trusted her for a year now, and she's never been wrong. He looks at the exposed riverbed one more time, at the people wading through the mud, at the fish flopping, at the water that's still pulling back further and further like something is sucking it away. And then far out in the river, he sees it. A line on the horizon, a darkness growing larger, coming fast. They run. Miguel doesn't think about what he's leaving behind. He doesn't think about the Cardosos or Pedro or anyone else. He just runs. Maria's hand is still gripping his arm, pulling him forward, and he follows. They need to get higher. Behind them, people are still wading through the mud of the exposed riverbed, still reaching for treasure, still believing that the worst is over. A woman is laughing, holding up something that catches the light. A coin, maybe, or a piece of jewelry, something that was lost and is now found. She'll be dead in less than a minute. Miguel glances back once, just once. The wave is closer now, much closer. It's not a wave like the ones that lap at the shore. It's a wall. A solid wall of dark water moving faster than any horse, carrying ships and debris and death in its arms. And it's not making a sound, not yet. It's silent. That's the worst part. This massive thing, this impossible thing, approaching in silence like a predator, like something that knows it doesn't need to hurry because its prey can't escape. Then it hits the mouth of the harbor. The sound that follows is like nothing Miguel has ever heard. A roar and a crash and a scream all at once. Not just the water itself, but the things inside it. Ships smashing together, wood splintering, stone cracking, and underneath all of that, a deeper sound, like the earth itself groaning in pain. The wall of water, 20 feet high at least, maybe 30, slams into the Ribera. He sees people disappear. One moment they're there, wading through the mud, reaching for their treasures, and the next moment they're gone, swallowed. Not even time to scream. The wave doesn't slow down. It doesn't hesitate. It sweeps across the quays, over the docks, into the lower floors of what's left of the palace. Ships that were anchored in the harbor are picked up and thrown onto land like toys. One of them, a merchant vessel with its sails still half raised, is carried over the quay and deposited in the middle of what used to be a street. The docks that Miguel has walked across dozens of times, where the merchants sold their fish and the sailors told their lies, are simply erased. The people, all those people who gathered on the waterfront because it was the only open space, all those people who thought they were safe. God, the people! Maria is still pulling him up the hill higher. His lungs are burning, his legs are screaming, his feet slip on cobblestones that are cracked and heaved from the earthquake, but he keeps running. Others are running too. Some of them were smart enough or scared enough to follow Maria's lead. They're climbing the narrow streets of the Alhama, scrambling over rubble, pushing past each other in their desperation to get higher. The water reaches the base of the hill and keeps coming. It floods the lower streets, the alleys, the squares. It pours into the ruins of buildings that the earthquake already destroyed. It finds the bodies of those who died in the shaking and carries them away, tumbling them through the debris like broken dolls. Miguel doesn't stop until he can't run anymore, until his body simply refuses to take another step, until his legs buckle and he falls against a wall, gasping for air that tastes like salt and smoke and death. He collapses against a wall somewhere high in the Alhama, though he's not sure exactly where. His breath comes in ragged gasps. His heart pounds so hard he can feel it in his throat. Maria is beside him. She's breathing hard, too, but her face is calm again, that terrible calm that seems wrong for a moment like this. "How did you know?" Miguel asks when he can speak. "Know what?" "The wave. How did you know it was coming?" Maria is quiet for a long moment. Below them, the water is still swirling through the lower streets, spreading, destroying. "My grandmother," she finally says. "She was from a fishing village in the Algarve. She told me stories, old stories about the sea pulling back before it rushes in. She said it happened once when she was a girl, took half the village, but that was a long time ago." "Yes." Maria looks down at the destruction. The sea has a long memory, longer than ours. They sit there for a while, watching. There's nothing else to do. The water begins to recede eventually. It doesn't go all at once, but slowly pulling back through the streets, leaving behind mud and debris and bodies. So many bodies. They lie in the streets like discarded things. Some are tangled in the wreckage of buildings. Some are caught on what's left of the docks. Some are simply floating face down in the water that hasn't drained away yet. Miguel counts them at first. Then he stops counting. The number is too big. It stops meaning. And then the second wave comes, smaller than the first, but still massive. It rushes up the river again, flooding the same streets, drowning anyone who ventured back down to help the survivors of the first wave. Miguel watches it happen, watches more people die, watches the water claim everything it can reach. There's a third wave after that, smaller still but relentless. The sea isn't satisfied. It wants all of them. By the time the water finally stops, the sun is past its peak and beginning to sink toward the horizon. Hours have passed. Miguel doesn't know how many. Time has stopped meaning anything. The lower parts of Lisbon are destroyed, not damaged, destroyed. The quays where Miguel once filled his water barrels are gone. The Ribera Palace, what was left of it after the earthquake, is flooded and broken. Its great rooms, where kings once walked and treasures once gleamed, are filled with mud and salt water and the bodies of those who sought shelter there. The streets where the galagos carried their loads, where the varinas sold their fish, are underwater or buried in debris. Miguel thinks of Francisco, the big galgo from the fountain, the one with arms like tree trunks, the one who complained about his wife's cooking for the feast. He was probably on the quays this morning hauling cargo. Miguel will never see him again. He'll never know if he survived. The Chafaras del Rey, where Miguel started every morning, is buried under rubble. The Royal Library is ruined. 70,000 books soaked and destroyed. The maps that charted the secret routes to the east. The archives of the Age of Discovery with their maps and charts and records showing how to navigate the world. The paintings by masters whose names Miguel doesn't know. All of it turned to ash. Miguel was crushed by the earth. It was drowned by the sea. And now it's being burned by fire. 3 disasters in one day, 3 ways to die. And Miguel survived all of them. By the time dawn comes, Miguel's eyes are red and stinging from the smoke. His throat is raw. His body aches from sleeping on stone, from running, from the terror that still hasn't fully left his muscles. But he's alive. The sky is gray with smoke. The sun is a pale disk, barely visible through the haze. It looks sick. Everything looks sick. Around him, people are stirring. Some are crying, some are praying, some are already moving, looking for food, looking for water, looking for anyone who might be able to help. The survival instinct doesn't wait for grief. It doesn't wait for understanding. It just keeps going. Miguel stands up. His legs are stiff. His joints protest every movement. But he stands. He looks out over what's left of Lisbon. The destruction is almost incomprehensible. Where there were buildings, there are ruins. Where there were streets, there is rubble. Where there were people, there are bodies. 85% of the city is gone. He doesn't know this number yet. No one does. But he can see it. He can feel it. The scale of it spreading out before him like a wound that will never fully heal. This was the richest city in Europe, the gateway to the world, the beating heart of an empire that stretched from Brazil to Indonesia, the city where the air smelled of cinnamon and pepper, where the streets were paved with the riches of distant lands, where the echoes of the Age of Discovery still resonated in every stone. Now it's a graveyard, and somewhere in that graveyard, under the rubble or in the water or turned to ash by the fire, are the Cardosos, the house where Miguel lived for a year, the kitchen where Maria cooked her cabbage soup, The room where Senora Cardardoso kept her dead son's things. The fountain where Miguel filled his barrels every morning and talked with Francisco and the other Galagos. All of it gone. Maria appears beside him. Her face is tired. Her clothes are filthy, but she's still standing, still moving, still breathing. "Come on," she says. "There's work to do." "What work? What's left to do?" Maria looks at him, really looks, the way she did when he first arrived, a scared boy from a fishing village who didn't know anything about anything. "Bury the dead," she says. "Feed the living." That's what there is to do. That's what there's always been to do. The words are simple, almost too simple, but there's a weight to them that Miguel feels in his bones. This is how you survive. This is how you go on. You don't think about the scale of it. You don't try to understand. You just do what's in front of you. One body, one meal, one step at a time. Miguel doesn't know where to start, doesn't know how to begin processing something this big, doesn't know if he'll ever stop seeing the wave when he closes his eyes. But Maria is already walking, picking her way down the hill toward the ruins, toward the work that needs doing. And like he's done for the past year, like he'll keep doing for all the years to come, Miguel follows. The days that follow blur together. Miguel loses track of time. There's no rhythm to life anymore, no bells to mark the hours, no routine to follow. There's just the work, the endless, terrible work. They dig through rubble with their bare hands. They pull out the living when they can, which isn't often. Mostly, they pull out the dead, bodies that have to be moved before disease spreads, bodies that have to be identified if they can be identified, which many cannot. The smell is beyond description. Death and smoke and rot and salt water all mixed together into something that burrows into your nose and never leaves. Some people tie cloth over their faces. It doesn't help. Maria works alongside him. She doesn't complain. She doesn't cry. She just works hour after hour until her hands are raw and bleeding, and then she keeps working. When Miguel falters, when the horror threatens to overwhelm him, she's there with a word or a look that says, "Keep going. Don't think. Just keep going." They find the Cardosos on the third day, or what's left of them. The house collapsed during the earthquake. Miguel recognizes it only by the door, somehow still standing in its frame, though everything behind it is rubble. He remembers walking through that door 100 times, 1,000 times, carrying water, running errands, coming back from the fountain with his shoulders aching and his feet sore. They dig for hours. Pedro finds Senor Cardardoso first. His broken leg meant he couldn't run from the fire. The flames had reached him before the smoke did. Miguel doesn't look at the face. He can't. Senora Cardardoso is nearby. She wouldn't leave her husband. Of course she wouldn't. Maria identifies her by the wedding ring still on her finger and by the small portrait of their dead son clutched in her hand. The same portrait that sat on the mantel in her room. The same son she'd been mourning for 3 years. Now they're together. Wherever souls go when the body is done with them, Miguel helps carry them to one of the mass graves. There are no coffins. There aren't enough coffins in all of Portugal for what Lisbon needs right now. There are no individual graves either. There's no time, no space, just pits growing larger every day and bodies wrapped in whatever cloth can be found. A priest says something over the grave. Miguel doesn't hear the words. He's thinking about the cabbage soup Maria used to make in that kitchen, about the way Senora Cardoso's voice would drift down from upstairs, talking to a son who wasn't there, about Senor Cardoso handing him that first letter with the red wax seal, warning him not to fail, about the small kindnesses and small cruelties that made a house feel almost like a home. He thinks about the errand to Captain Fernandez, about standing on the docks watching the ships, about how young he was then, just a year ago, though it feels like another lifetime. Maria stands beside him. Her face is stone, but her hands are shaking. They weren't bad people, she says quietly. Not good exactly, but not bad. They paid on time. They didn't beat the servants. That's more than many can say. It's not a eulogy. It's not meant to be. It's just the truth. Gone now. All of it. On the 5th day, the fires finally burn themselves out. There's nothing left to burn. And on the 6th day, the man arrives. His name is Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo. Most people call him the Secretary of State. History will call him the Marquis de Pombal, though he won't receive that title for another 15 years. Right now, he's just the man in charge, the man who has to figure out what to do with a city that no longer exists. Miguel sees him from a distance, riding through the ruins with a small group of officials. He's not what Miguel expected, not a soft nobleman who's never done a day of work in his life. He's sharp-eyed and practical-looking, surveying the destruction with the expression of someone who's already making plans. The story spread quickly. When someone asked what should be done, Pombal said 5 words that became famous: bury the dead and feed the living. Not prayers, not explanations, not questions about why God would allow such a thing to happen to such a devout city on such a holy day, just the work that needed to be done. Miguel decides he likes this man. Some of the priests don't share his opinion. They want to hold processions to pray, to atone for whatever sins brought God's wrath upon them. Pombal has no patience for this. The dead need burying before disease spreads. The living need feeding before they starve. Prayers can wait. He sends soldiers into the ruins with orders that seem harsh, but are necessary. Looters are to be executed on the spot. Bodies are to be loaded onto barges and buried at sea. No matter what the church says about proper Christian burial, there's no time for ceremony, no room for sentiment. Only survival matters. Gallows are erected on the high points of the city. At least 34 people are hanged for looting in the weeks after the earthquake. It seems brutal. It is brutal. But it keeps order in a city that could easily descend into chaos. Pombal moves fast. Within weeks, he's ordered the construction of temporary shelters. Tents and wooden shacks spring up across the hillsides, housing the survivors who have nowhere else to go. Within a month, he sent questionnaires to every parish in the country asking detailed questions about the earthquake. What time did it start? How long did it last? Which direction did buildings fall? Did the sea rise or fall first? How many people died? It seems strange gathering information when there's so much else to do. But Pombal is thinking ahead. He wants to understand what happened so he can prevent it from happening again. He's treating the earthquake not as an act of God, but as a problem to be solved, a scientific puzzle that can be analyzed, understood, and perhaps someday predicted. The answers to those questionnaires are still kept in the National Archives today. Because of them, modern scientists can reconstruct exactly what happened on that November morning. Pombal didn't know it, but he was inventing the field of seismology. The king is no help. Jose, I survived only because he happened to be outside the city that morning. He's developed a terror of stone buildings. He refuses to sleep inside walls. Instead, he lives in a complex of elaborate tents on a hillside outside Lisbon, surrounded by luxury, but haunted by fear. He'll live in those tents for the rest of his life. He'll never feel safe again. Pombal doesn't have time for fear. He has a city to rebuild. The plan he develops is unlike anything Europe has ever seen. Instead of rebuilding the narrow medieval streets that turned into death traps during the earthquake, he designs a new city center. Wide boulevards, open squares, buildings that follow a standard design built with a new technique that Pombal's engineers have invented. They call it the Gaiola Pombalina, the Pombaline cage. It's a flexible wooden frame inside the walls designed to sway during an earthquake instead of cracking. To test the design, Pombal has soldiers march in formation around scale models of the buildings, their synchronized footsteps simulating the shake of the earth. It works. The buildings don't fall. Miguel watches the new city rise month by month, year by year. He finds work with one of the construction crews, carrying materials, mixing mortar, doing whatever needs doing. It's hard labor, but it's labor with a purpose. Every brick laid is a small act of defiance against the disaster that tried to erase this city from the earth. The scale of the rebuilding is almost as overwhelming as the destruction. Thousands of workers swarm over the ruins, clearing debris, laying foundations, raising walls. The old property lines are ignored. The old rights of the church and the nobility are swept aside. Pombal doesn't care who owned what before the earthquake. He cares about building something that will last. The new streets are wide and straight, laid out in a grid that would have been impossible in the tangled medieval city. Light and air can flow through them. Carriages can pass. And if another earthquake comes, people will have space to run. The new buildings are standardized. Every facade follows the same design, the same proportions, the same rules. It's practical, not beautiful in the old way. But there's a kind of beauty in the practicality, a beauty of survival, a beauty of learning from disaster. Maria stays too. She finds work in one of the new kitchens that feed the workers, cooking meals for hundreds of people every day. It's not so different from what she did before. She says, just more mouths to feed, just more hungry people who need to be kept alive. They don't talk much about what happened, what's there to say. They lived, others didn't. The work continues. The new city center rises where the old one fell. At its heart, on the exact spot where the Ribera Palace once stood, Pombal builds a great square. He calls it the Praça do Comércio, Commerce Square. It's a statement. The old Lisbon was a city of kings and churches, of gold and God. The new Lisbon will be a city of commerce and reason, a city of the Enlightenment. The grand arch at one end, the Rua Augusta, serves as a gateway from the sea into the heart of the new city. In the center of the square stands a bronze statue of the king on horseback, trampling snakes beneath his hooves. Order triumphing over chaos, reason triumphing over fear. The philosophers of Europe are paying attention. Voltaire writes about the earthquake, using it to challenge the idea that this is the best of all possible worlds. If God is good, if God is powerful, if God cares about human beings, then why would he allow such horror? Why would he kill tens of thousands of devout worshippers on a day dedicated to his saints? Rousseau responds differently. He argues that the disaster wasn't God's fault, but humanity's. If people hadn't built their houses so close together, so tall, with so much flammable material, the damage would have been less. The earthquake was natural, the catastrophe was man-made. The arguments go back and forth across Europe. Pamphlets are printed, letters are exchanged, coffee houses buzz with debate. The questions don't have easy answers. Maybe they don't have answers at all. But the asking of them changes something fundamental. The earthquake doesn't just destroy a city, it destroys a way of thinking. The comfortable certainty that God is watching, that everything happens for a reason, that faith alone is enough to protect the faithful. All of that crumbles like the walls of the Cairo convent. What rises in its place is something new, something harder maybe, but also more honest. The Enlightenment thinkers look at Lisbon and see not God's judgment, but a natural disaster. Something that can be studied, understood, prepared for. Something that doesn't require prayer, but action. Not everyone agrees. Some see the earthquake as divine punishment for Portugal's sins. The Inquisition was burning people in the Rocio just a few years before. Perhaps God finally decided to burn back. But Pombal has no patience for such talk. He has work to do. And so day by day, brick by brick, the new Lisbon rises. Years pass. Miguel grows older. The scared boy who arrived from a fishing village becomes a man with calloused hands and a steady gaze, the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving something unsurvivable. He marries eventually a woman named Anna. Not the Anna that Zhao once dreamed of writing letters to. This Anna is a survivor too, a widow whose husband died in the earthquake. They understand each other in ways that don't need words. They build a small life together in the new city, in one of the standardized Pombalan buildings with its flexible wooden frame hidden inside the walls. They have children, 2 girls, and a boy. Miguel tells them about the earthquake sometimes when they're old enough to understand. He tells them about Maria, who died peacefully in her sleep when Miguel was in his 30s, still working in her kitchen until the very end. He tells them about the wave and the fire and the people who didn't survive. Pedro stayed in Lisbon too, helped with the rebuilding, married a woman from the northern provinces, and had 5 children. He stopped snoring eventually, or maybe Miguel just stopped noticing. Zhao went home, back to his village up the coast, back to wherever Anna was waiting, whether she remembered his name, whether she'd found someone else in the years he was gone. Miguel never found out. They lost touch. That happens after the end of the world. He doesn't tell them everything. Some things are too heavy to pass on. Some memories are better left buried, like the bodies in the mass graves, like the old city under the new. He keeps a few things from before. A tin medallion of St. Christopher given to him by a nun at the Cairo convent the year before it fell. Patron saint of travelers. He wasn't a traveler then, just a boy who carried water. But he's traveled since, through fire and water and the end of the world. Maybe the nun knew something he didn't. He never forgets the earthquake. How could he? The memory lives in his body, in the way he tenses whenever the ground seems to shift, in the dreams that still come sometimes, dreams of water rushing toward him and waves that never stop. But he learns to live with it the way survivors always learn to live with what they've survived, the way humans always have and always will. Maria grows older, too, before she dies. Her hair goes gray, then white. Her hands, which once moved so quickly in the kitchen, slow down. But she never stops working, never stops feeding the hungry, never stops doing what needs to be done. That's what poor people do, she tells Miguel once years later when he asks how she keeps going. We survive. We rebuild. We keep going. The rich can afford to break down. The poor can't. It sounds harsh. It is harsh, but it's also true. The city they rebuild is different from the one that fell. The narrow alleys are gone, replaced by wide streets that let in light and air. The buildings are standardized, practical, beautiful in their simplicity. The azulejos, the painted tiles, are mass-produced now, covering the facades of buildings across the city in patterns of blue and white. It's a city of the future, built on the ruins of the past. But not everything is new. Some things remain. The Cairo convent, where the roof collapsed during the earthquake and crushed the worshippers inside, is never rebuilt. It stands today as it stood then, open to the sky, a skeleton of what it once was. The Gothic arches reach upward, framing nothing but clouds and stars. When you walk inside and look up, you're seeing exactly what the survivors saw in November of 1755. It's a memorial to what was lost, a reminder that even the strongest walls can fall, a warning and a promise. This happened. This was real. We will not forget. The Alhambra survives too. The oldest district, built on solid rock, weathered the earthquake better than most. Its narrow streets and ancient buildings still twist and climb the hillside, much as they did in Miguel's time, much as they did for centuries before. If you walk there today, you might hear fado drifting from an open window. That music that wasn't yet called fado in Miguel's time, but that already carried the same feeling, the same songs about ships and loss and love that the water forgot. Miguel heard it once on a night when he was running through the Bro Alto with someone else's secrets in his pocket. A woman's voice cutting through the darkness, singing about saudade. Saudade, the Portuguese word for a longing for something lost, a melancholy that's also somehow sweet. The whole city has it now baked into its bones. It's the sound of a place that has seen the end of the world and decided to keep going. The Praça do Comércio is still there, too, on the spot where the palace once stood, the palace where kings walked and treasures gleamed and the archives of an empire were stored. All of that is gone now, buried under the square, washed away by the tsunami, turned to ash by the fire. But the square remains beautiful and open to the sea. It's a monument to what was lost and what was built in its place. Tourists walk there now taking photographs, drinking coffee at the cafes, unaware that they're standing on a graveyard, on the bones of a city that died and was reborn. That's the thing about history. It's always there under your feet, even when you can't see it. Every stone has a story. Every street holds a ghost. Miguel lived to see the new Lisbon finished. He lived to see the wide boulevards filled with people, the new churches consecrated, the commerce flowing through the harbor once again. He lived to see the city he'd watched die come back to life. And then, like everyone, he died too. His bones are somewhere in this city, unmarked, forgotten, mixed with the earth that holds so many others. His name is lost to history. His story is lost. But the work he did remains. Every brick he laid, every body he buried, every day he got up and kept going when given up would have been easier. That work remains built into the fabric of a city that refused to die. And now, here you are, warm and safe in your bed, listening to a story about a time when the earth itself couldn't be trusted, when the sea turned against the people it had always sustained. When fire consumed everything that earthquake and water had spared, your pillow is soft, your blankets are warm, the ground beneath you is solid and still. The sea is far away. The fire is contained in its proper places. These are the luxuries that Miguel and Maria and all those other survivors would have given anything for. A moment of peace, a moment of safety, a moment when the world wasn't falling apart around them. They didn't get those moments, not for a long time. They had to earn their survival day by day, brick by brick, body by body, but they did survive, and the city they rebuilt still stands. Lisbon is there tonight, glowing softly on the banks of the Tagus. The fado still plays in the Alhama. The ships still pass through the harbor. The bells ring from the churches that were built after the churches that fell. And somewhere, if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of Maria's voice, practical and calm, carrying across the centuries. Bury the dead, feed the living. That's what there is to do. That's what there's always been to do. Rest now. Let your body sink into the mattress. Let your muscles relax one by one from your feet to your calves, to your thighs, to your back, to your shoulders, to your neck, to your face. The earth is still tonight. The sea is calm. The fire is far away. You're safe. You're warm. You're here, and that's enough. That's always been enough. Sleep well. Dream of nothing or dream of everything. Dream of cities that fall and cities that rise. Dream of people who survive against all odds, who keep going when keeping going seems impossible. Dream of Lisbon, golden in the morning light, built on the ruins of what came before. And when you wake, the world will still be there, imperfect and beautiful and waiting for you, just like it always has been, just like it always will be. Good night.